Hello and welcome to episode number 102 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your most dynamic host, Kellen, who never speaks in a monotone voice. I am joined on the Board Game Barrage podcast by Mark and Neilan.
Hey there.
Hello.
The Board Game Barrage podcast is a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends even when you're losing. We continue our journey today, our journey together, where we explore the top 50 games of all time. And once again, we like to remind the listeners that this is an objective list. So never think that we speak subjectively when we talk about our favorite things. This is serious business. These games are not toys. If you want to talk to us about our picks, about your picks, please join us in the Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Please reach out to us on any form of social media that you would like. Please leave a review of the podcast. It helps us a great deal as we move into 2020, our cyborg future. Today, we're going to be covering the games rank 30 through 21. I'm glad I stuck the landing on that because I keep getting confused on the number system that we're using.
Counting.
The very obscure number system. So why don't you have anything to say? Are you guys quiet over there?
I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
You're
We're jammed. I'm looking at my
Consummate.
game. I'm excited to talk about it.
Exactly.
All right. Here we go. My number 30th favorite game of all time is perhaps the most maligned board game in modern history. You can't see it, but Mark's eyes have gotten very wide. Very, very wide here. I think that Neilan, in particular, has done his best over the years to try to kill this game.
Yeah, how could you?
Still trying.
Any chance he gets, he tries to kill Splendor.
Right. Yep.
Splendor, for whatever reason, is a fantastic game that everyone is trying to kill. That would be like a cool movie concept. You know what I mean? Like everyone just wants you dead. Like everyone.
Right.
And it
Who
could
will
have,
be the Splendor killer?
yeah, who's going to be the one? Splendor is engine building distilled down to its most basic. You're picking up these beautiful chips, these lovely chips to hold in your hand. Lovely is probably a word I should use to describe my girlfriend and not the chips.
It works both ways.
Well, but they're sort of correlating them together in some small sense.
What's wrong with that?
Neilan, defend me. You love these chips.
Yeah, I
Holding.
famously love
rolling.
to run them through my fingers.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's an early Board Game Barrage bit.
In Splendor, you acquire cards that then a card has a ruby on it. And from then on, you have one ruby to spend every time you buy more cards. So you go deep into rubies, and then you're trying to get these nobles, which need a combination of rubies, sapphires, and gems. The game ends right when it needs to. It has a great sense of pace. There is an early, a mid, and a late game, and you frequently will misjudge when to hit and when to go for those big points near the end and when to stop getting the early gem point cards. I think this game works so well as a introduction to this part of engine building. I've had a great time playing it with non-gamers. I have not tried any of the expansions as I don't know that I can be bothered. I'd like to try them, and I'd probably enjoy them, but I don't know that the game needs it. You cannot kill Splendor, Mark. What do you have to say to that?
I'm just looking forward to seeing where Century Spice Road falls on your list.
Yeah. Anyone who thinks that is just so wrong that I don't even know what to say to you.
I agree.
Splendor is a game that I feel has always just hovered off of the bottom edge of my list. I do love it a lot, and I agree with you. It's certainly a great game to show people that are on the cusp of the hobby, and man, those chips are amazing.
Well, at least the old chips were right.
Yeah, exactly. The new chips, not so much, unfortunately. Like you, I actually have the expansion and have only tried a couple of the modules. Like, it just never felt that appealing to change what is good about base Splendor, which is its simplicity. Yeah, Splendor's great.
My number 30 game of all time is a... Did you have a line?
Did I have a line or do I have a line? I always... Who's bringing the heat to this thing?
Why didn't
Who's
you
bringing
Splendor
the spice?
Splendid? Why don't you say Splendor Splendid?
Who's bringing the spice to this podcast?
I haven't even started adding the spice.
You don't add any
I got a
spice.
bushel
You are
of
not
spice.
spicy.
I'm adding this. I'm getting ready to add the spice.
The biggest spice that you add to this podcast is laughing.
All right, so I'll take it from there. My number 30 game of all time is a double crossover with my friend Neilan. It's Saul, Last Days of a Star. Neilan has already spoken about this. But I'll just reiterate, I just love the freshness of it. I love the timing aspect. The parasitic nature of it, I think, is really interesting and novel to gaming, where you are building structures in unique ways. It's like the fact that you have to align your workers in a specific shape in order to build a structure is interesting for a game that is so built on timing and space. The spatial aspect, the fact that it's not just putting a person in the right space, but it's putting a cluster of people in a very specific order is interesting. And the fact that you're doing that with a game that introduces new powers each time you play it, as well as the idea that you're building these structures for your own benefit, but also you're allowing your opponents to benefit from the structures as well. You're going to get a small gain whenever they do, but is it worth it to make these actions available to them? That's the question that you have to ask yourself whenever you play Soul. And finally, again, I've already mentioned this, but the timing aspect is big. I love games that have some emphasis on timing or tempo, and Soul does this in a very interesting, unique way. It also looks striking as well. So my number 30 game of all time is Soul, Last Days of a Star.
Yeah, I want to emphasize what you said about the look of it, because it's just got the board is just a stark black, and the player pieces are sort of unusual colors, and they're all little minis. It just has a really distinct look to it it's like a space game doesn't always mean the same thing aesthetically, but this looks like a space game.
I agree.
It's like space, the giant sun in the middle, and all these ships moving around it.
And I do want to touch back on your point about the thematic aspect of this does come through, because one of your actions you can take is to just sacrifice one of your ships to the center of the sun, and it's often a move that's done late for a last minute push towards the end, because it is a race game. You're trying to hit a certain number of points. So at the very end, there's this flurry of people sacrificing their ships to the sun, and it just has this like cinematic feel to it in that respect.
Oh, one thing we didn't mention, it has a variable clock, which I think is quite nice.
Yes.
You don't exactly know when it's going to end, which I always like. Yeah, great game.
So, number 30 game of all time, up 8 spots from last year, Saul, Last Days of a Star.
My number 30 game is a game that's more or less held its spot from the previous list. It is Azul. Azul is a good mix of like a puzzle placement game where you're gaining a tile, placing it on your grid in order to score points, but it has a little bit of that sort of, let's call it the Kellen bite of meanness. Like if you take a tile from a factory that someone else wants, they might get left with a whole bunch of tiles that they can't use. It can be punishing in a way that is surprising for a game that's as accessible as it is. It is a lot more about sort of trying to find the right time to take the right tile from the right spot before someone else does it before you, trying to find the way to work that into your grid. There are a couple of spin-offs for Azul that I have not tried yet that I would like to. But Azul still stands strong as a really solid game in 2019.
Yep, Azul feels to me not quite to the level of Codenames in terms of like an appeal to everyone, evergreen sort of feeling game, but it does have that like classic feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my number 30 game, Azul.
I'm now ruminating on whether I should have added that Azul to this list. Azul is a really great game that can be as mean or as nice as you really want it to be. And I think that that's a huge blessing. There are people who prefer some of the newer Azul versions because apparently they take a little bit of the fangs out of Azul, but I think that that's where the part of it is for us, is being able to play a nice, puzzly little game while also getting to be quite conniving and rude about how you're getting to that puzzle. My number 29 best game of all time is the second or third, I think it's the second Oink game in this list. This is A Fake Artist Goes to New York. It's hard to recommend buying A Fake Artist Goes to New York when you can make it with like index cards and markers, but the production is quite adorable. Yeah. It's quite cute. In A Fake Artist Goes to New York, similar to Detective Club, everyone at the table will know a word except for one player, and that word might be dolphin. And then everyone has to draw one line and then pass the paper to the next player who draws another line and draws another line and another line. And then after everyone has drawn the picture 2 times, you're trying to determine who didn't know what you were drawing. As you can imagine, this is hilarious because someone will start the curvature of the dolphin, and then the next player will literally like just zigzag way away from it up to make it like clearly not a dolphin. Everyone knew that we were drawing a dolphin except that person, and they've drawn a giant hump on its back that makes it look like a camel. You have to make a choice and just really go for it, or you can try to be stupid about it and someone drew like a squiggle bird and you don't even know that it's a bird, so you just draw one next to it. Right. And everyone's like, who drew the second bird in the sky here? This is one of those games that you hear it and you think, I must have already played games like this or things like it, but it just works so incredibly well as a package together. I really, really enjoy A Fake Artist Goes to New York and think it is well worth your time in the party game world. Pick it up. My number 29, A Fake Artist Goes to New York.
You know where you can pick that up now?
New York.
Target.
Target.com.
Or your local Target.
In any of the many locations that they have throughout the country.
Make sure to pick up a bucket of KFC on your way there.
You can use a store locator to use your zip code.
You can't mix and match sponsorships.
They all
pay out.
Can you imagine how much money we'd have?
If what? If we're actually being paid by our pseudo
if our sponsors were to actually pay their bills.
Yeah, right. We keep sending them invoices, but nothing comes back. My number 29 game of all time is new to the list. I have 5 remaining games that are new to the list, and this is the 5th. This is Great Western Trail. It's a game that I've been wanting to play for a long time. We finally got around to it earlier this year. Really enjoyed it. The board is one big rondelle. It's sort of an interesting take on the rondelle mechanism.
But isn't all of life just sort of a circle?
Yeah, we're all living a rondelle. I thought the rondelle mechanism was interesting because the spaces on the rondelle are extended by the buildings you place on the board. So whereas early in the game, you're really whipping around the board because there aren't many buildings to stop at, as the game progresses and as the town's infrastructure gets built out by the players, the number of steps you take to get to the end increases. Now that's mitigated by the fact that you can get yourself to go faster, but it's just interesting that the players are sort of building this rondelle together, and also the hand management, light deck building aspect to it is sort of interesting. It's interesting that you want to, by the end of your journey, have the best hand you can in order to sell the cattle and take another trip around the rondelle. I think starting at Kansas City, or you ending in Kansas City, I can't remember. But yeah, Great Western Trail, Mr. Fister. Good one.
Mr. Fister.
Yeah, it's the Mr. Fister.
I wonder if he's related to Mr. Cthulhu.
Maybe. It's sort of see in the eyes. I'm very interested to look into the expansion, which I've heard is pretty nice.
There's a lot of good stuff.
But what about the re-implementation in Maracaibo that's similar to Great Western Trail combined with other mechanisms from all the great Euro designers?
Yeah, what about that?
I hadn't thought of that. It's a good point. That's my number 29, Great Western Trail.
My number 29 best game of all time is a game that I have to admit, I think I just forgot about last year, because every time I would look back at my list, I would expect this to be on it, and it just wasn't there, and I was very confused by that. So this is a bold insertion into my list, somewhere in the middle. This is Quest for El Dorado. It's a game I love a lot. It is a Reiner Knizia deck building race game. It is extremely accessible, extremely fun and quick and fast, but still has enough there for the avid gamer. Like, it's not a game that is going to blow a heavy board gamer away, but in that sort of Knizia magic, it does a lot with very little, while still being accessible and still being fun and different every time you play it, because you can pursue a bunch of different strategies that are going to vary depending on the map. It always leads to sort of very frustrating but fun moments of blocking other players and not being able to quite do what you want to do with the cards you have. Very interesting decisions. Very fun game. That is Quest for El Dorado.
I'd love to play more of this. I don't love the fact that all of the cards are available to you the whole time. It just feels a little messy compared to like a game that gives you like 10 options. There's I don't know how many there are, but
the way it works for me is like they're not all available all of the time. So like you open up slots, and then when someone opens up a slot, they can bring one of the new cards, and then only those selection are available. So it does sort of slightly limit what is available at any given time. But yeah, there are moments where you're choosing from the whole array, but then you're locking that in for future people to choose from. That is Quest for El Dorado, my 29th best game of all time.
28th best game of all time is a game about bugs.
What is this game? A game about bugs.
Cockroach. Poker.
Or, as the Germans call it,
Kakerlaken. Poker. No, that is Kakerlaken Spiel. I can't remember. Kakerlaken is the word that we like to say here on the Board Game Barrage podcast. Cockroach Poker is my preferred small bluffing game. The other one that many cite here would be Skull, but I prefer Cockroach Poker. In Cockroach Poker, you hand another player a card and you say, "This is a spider." And then that player has to either believe you and pick it up and look at it and pass it to another player, or say, "You're full of it. I don't believe you, and then flip it over to reveal it. So this game is a series of aha and gotcha moments. What makes the game interesting is that you actually only can lose the game. You don't really win the game. There's one loser. And so if you have 2 or 3 of one type of bug, everyone is going to be trying to get that last one to you. So there's a little bit of like group collaboration to hide the bat until the perfect moment and put it in front of Neilan when he has no other choice but to take a swing at it and then hopefully get got. Cockroach Poker is fantastic. And that is Cockroach Poker, my number 28 best game of all time.
My 28 best game of all time is new to the list, so it's 4th remaining new game to the list. This is a game that was on Kellen's list last year, probably on this year as well, I'm guessing. Traders of Genoa. I'd not played it before this year and got a chance to play it. This is that prototypical sort of Euro you don't expect it. It looks very drab, a lot of browns, a lot of dour looking men and like donkeys and spices on the board and stuff like that. But it is a fantastic Euro negotiation game. It's almost like a very pure Euro and very pure negotiation game wrapped up in one. Everything is on the table. When it's your turn to act, you can negotiate where you're going to move the shared pawn. You can negotiate anything, and everything's up for grabs. If anybody starts a negotiation up, then that aspect of the game will be negotiated upon. And I just love that. It handles the Euro aspect and the negotiating part of it really, really well. I was blown away. This is, again, one of the games that I had not played, even though it's been around for forever, and was blown away by how much it holds up.
I really want to try this. The way you guys describe it, like a pure negotiation-driven Euro, sounds awesome. It falls into the same camp of games we were describing, where I think the cover and the box put me off it for so long.
Also, if you're looking to pick this game up in the vein of Settlers of Catan being renamed to Catan, they have shortened the name of Traders of Genoa to just Genoa.
I know that was a sticking point for a lot of people considering it.
Yeah, so now that they've gotten rid of the trade, there's still a lot of trading in the game, right. So don't get got if you don't want trading for Genoa, a great game.
My number 28 game is Coloretto. This is sort of my go-to. We're going to just play a round of this and keep playing rounds of this to fill as much time as we need to while still having a substantive, great experience. Coloretto is a quick, fast game that you can teach to just pretty much anyone, and is still satisfying to play because it has press your luck. It has moments of sort of trying to screw the people over at the table. It's a very simple package of just trying to play cards to these piles in the middle until you sort of are either want to stop and just take a pile or keep adding for a pile that someone else could potentially grab. That's the game. You sort of keep doing that. You're collecting sets of colors in order to get the most points. It's very, very simple and very, very fun. It's a tiny, tiny box. You could take it anywhere and have a great time with Coloretto, my number 28 best game of all time.
What a fantastic filler game. Perhaps the best filler game of all time, in my opinion. Just enough decision space to be interesting while also being so accessible that you can play with your sister who doesn't play games. I know this for a fact because the Blue Tank just played it with her sister who does not play games, and they had a great time playing Coloretto. The 27th best board game of all time is Antoine Bauza's Hanabi. That's him, right? Yeah. I never know these designers' names. I just don't care. Hanabi is perhaps one of the most inventive games of the last decade. And I don't say that lightly. In Hanabi, you are playing a shared cooperative game, but you cannot look at your own cards. So you're trying to arrange colors going from 1 to 5, but you have to play a card blind. And so you're relying on other people to give you clues and information about your cards to decide whether or not it's relevant to keep, play, or trash a card in your hand. This game has these agonizing moments where you just get incredibly frustrated, or you're desperately hoping that you communicated the right thing to the player. And what you think you're communicating and what they receive are sometimes dramatically different. And it's fun after a game of Hanabi to discuss and figure out where you went wrong and try to figure out how you might improve your score. There are some variants to make it harder or easier if you're good or bad at the game. And I have recently picked up Hanabi 2 Deluxe Electric Boogaloo edition, which is tiles instead of cards. So if you have weak or your hands lack the dexterousness to hold on to the cards, you can get the tile version and play Hanabi that way. You guys both kind of like Hanabi, right?
I do.
I like Hanabi.
Yeah. My number 27 game has risen 5 spots since last year. This is Is it my favorite Rosenberg currently? I think it is my favorite Rosenberg currently. This is Le Havre. I love the smoothness and simplicity sort of this game. On your turn, you are moving down a track which sort of counts down the round. So there are a certain number of actions per round. When you move your pawn down the track towards the end of the round, all you're doing is you're filling whatever space is assigned to that spot with resources. So you may move your piece to like the wood spot, and then wood gets an injection of resources. And then on your turn, you take one of two actions. So first you move your piece to add some resources to the board, and then you either take any resource that's available that's been filled up through the course of the game, or you can move your one worker to one of the buildings that's available. The buildings are located either in your own area these are buildings that you've built. They can be buildings that are sort of shared in the city, so you can use a shared building, or you can use one of the buildings that your opponent has built, which is an interesting part of the game. It sort of reminds me of that Keyflower idea where your opponent can build a hex in Keyflower, but you can utilize their power. So the same goes here with Le Havre. And as you might expect, if you use somebody else's building, you have to pay them some sort of fee. But it's interesting because you're not forced to move that pawn around. So if you're protecting a space of your own, or if you want to prevent your opponent from using a space, you can just go ahead and use the space and just sit there until they take some sort of drastic action to force you out. The buildings that you can build sort of echo other Rosenberg games, so they either can get you resources or they can convert resources, but they feel a little more powerful, a little more swingy, which is nice. They also come out in a randomized fashion, which sort of changes the tempo of the game. I just love how smooth it is. It's like move down the path, take an action, then your opponent move down the path, take an action. A knock against the game is I think it excels at 2 or 3 players. I don't think 4 players works very well, but it's a really well-designed, smooth Rosenberg resource converter type game. I really enjoy it.
You know that joke in like a infomercial where the person is like inept at using a microwave or whatever, and they like invent a new product? There's something about all of the chits in Le Havre. It's like a pain to like move them around, and people have invented so many different like little trays for each thing. I kind of imagine all the chits, like you just can't hold them all in your hand. There's a lot of pieces.
There are. I traded for this game, unsurprisingly, and it came in a carrying case sort of organizer.
But it's quite good. It's a one that I have not played enough, but I could see it being pretty high on my list if I'd played more.
That is number 27, Le Havre, up 5 spots from last year.
My number 27 is a new entry on my list. It is not a 2019 game, but it's a game that I played only once last year, and I wanted to play it a few more times before I knew where to put it. It is a fantastic area control game, El Grande. The thing that's great about El Grande is it sort of has everything you'd want from it's not a dudes on the map game, but it has the elements you'd want from that type of area control game where you're jostling for positions on the map, but it has a Eurogame purity to it, where the mechanisms that allow you to control those areas are quite simple and is mostly dictated by cards that come out that give you special abilities every round. It has a very cool sort of bidding system where you have a certain allocation of cards you have to use at the right times in order to get the powers that you need. And it just leads to sort of great, strong moments where you're sort of getting your pieces into the territories you need to in order to get the points that you need to win the game. El Grande is fantastic. Every time I play it, I'm sort of reminded again, this is the prototypical example of the brown Saturnine box that does not look inviting, but is hiding a game that is so much better than it looks on the surface. There's El Grande, my number 27 best game of all time.
You will find no objections to El Grande from Mark and I don't think.
That's correct, sir.
But we will talk more loquacious and eloquently later on in future episodes. Sorry, Neilan. The number 26 best board game of all time is Dogs of War.
Oh, God, I want to play it so badly.
Yeah, so this has moved down my list, and it's only moved down my list because I haven't played it.
Yeah.
And I have this sort of, if I'm not playing it, then it's not as good as it once was, which is half true and half not true. I think, Neilan, you played this just once.
Yeah,
right?
I played it once. I loved it.
Dogs of War is great because you are doing some negotiating and politicking while also doing some worker placement. So there are battles happening each round of the game, and you are placing workers to support one side of a conflict. But you have a hidden goal of wanting a certain faction to be leading at the end of the game, and you get more points if that's how it nets out. So you're having to balance placing a worker to get a short-term benefit against the long-term benefit of your faction getting into power or in where it needs to be. Dogs of War is fantastically overproduced by Cool Mini or not. There isn't expansions for this game that are very hard to acquire. I don't think you need to acquire the expansions, and I think the base game is fairly cheap when you look around for it because it did not take off in a way that I feel like it deserves. Dogs of War is such an interactive Euro game, and for that I am grateful.
My number 26 game of all time rose 18 spots. This is a callback to the Doctor and to my ancestral homeland. This is Raw. One of my favorite auction games, period. One of my favorite, but not my favorite, Knizia auction game. There's been a ton said about Raw. There's a push your luck element where the kitty that you are building up for the auction is made bigger by the player. So on your turn, you can do one of two things. You can either draw a tile from the bag, which makes the sort of prize pot larger, or you can call Raw, which is basically calling an auction. And then players bid in a sort of novel way where there are 16 tiles numbered 1 to 16, and that is your sort of your bid total. You do a once around where if you win the auction, you place tile you've used into the center, you acquire whatever tile was in the center as well as all of the tokens that you've won. It's got a set collection aspect where you're trying to gain certain types of tiles and trying to avoid other types. Some tiles score you at the end, some tiles score every round. It's got a lot of things working for it, and it's done in a Knizia very smooth way that I really enjoy. It's one of my favorite auction games. I think it's done really well and very inventively. So this is my number 26 game, Raw.
I have not played enough Raw, but it is another one of those like Taj Mahal where when you start it, you're kind of like, oh, and then every couple of minutes there's like a, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, like that's how this works? Like that's interesting. There's all these realizations that you have as you're playing Raw.
That aren't clear on the rules explanation necessarily.
Right, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love, just to call out one mechanic, just the grabbing the bidding tile, which will be your bidding tile for the next round, is so smart because it's like setting yourself up for the best round at the time that feels appropriate, and whether that's more important than what you're grabbing. It's a simple thing that makes it so great. Raw is a game I want to play more of next year for sure. I played it for the first time very recently and was very, very pleased with it. My number 26 game of all time is Android Netrunner, which I have to admit is a game that's hard to recommend in 2019 because this is a living card game that is dead. It is sadly no longer in production, and it's also hard to even recommend to just get the core game because without the promise of a game that's sort of going to keep growing, there's not a whole lot there. It's a game that I want to resurface in some other form with either constructed decks or, maybe a deck builder. I don't know if that would work, but I just like the idea so much of what you're doing in Android Netrunner, in that it's an asymmetric two-player game where one person is the hacker, one person is the evil corporation. The hacker is running on their servers, trying to break down their firewalls, like deploying sort of like hacking devices. It's a very neat game that sort of really speaks to its theme quite strongly. The art on the cards is beautiful. It's just not something I could see myself playing much of in the future because my patience with deck construction, even if this game was still around, was pretty low. So yes, someone bring back something like Android Netrunner in a closed box and I would be ecstatic.
The way you kept saying hacker, hacker, hacker reminds me of my favorite animated GIF of all time. Have you seen this? No. It's a guy running around a Best Buy in all black with sunglasses on, and he's like mashing the keyboard on the laptop, on each laptop in succession, and it's going like NASA hacked, NSA hacked, UNICEF hacked, Statue of Liberty hacked, and then it's him like banging on like scanner beds and like things that you can't even type on, and just like kind of zooming around a Best Buy.
No, exactly what video. It's like the Mega 64 Deus Ex video, I think originally. It's so good.
Yeah, it probably is. It is. Is it a Deus Ex thing?
I'm pretty sure it
probably
is. Yeah.
Android Netrunner has such vibrant art, such interesting representations of people in it, and has such a fantastic, like, different... The player playing the hacker is doing something different than the player playing the corporation. So there's so many inventive and interesting ideas in it that if Cyberpunk is something you're at all interested in two-player games, you may still want to buy it.
Yeah, maybe. If you could get like a thorough set and we're interested in just like pursuing the meta of the cards you have, sure. People talk about cube drafting, Android Netrunner, and that is intriguing in and of itself. Maybe someday in the future, but that is number 26, Android Netrunner.
My number 25 favorite board game of all time is perhaps the game on the list. Let me quickly check. Yes, that I see to have the potential to rise into the top 10 as we make our way into 2020. This is a extremely cutthroat Euro game that has gone up for me from 31 to 25, so big jumps. Maybe predicting some big jumps in the future.
Rise.
This is Keyflower. Keyflower is a auction worker placement game. What that means is you're bidding to get tiles, and the first player to bid is establishing what type of color of meeple that's being used on the board. And from then on, that tile can only be bid on using those types of meeples. But once you get kicked off of that with a higher bid, you can then use those workers elsewhere. But in addition to that, you're building a tableau of worker placement opportunities on your own board. So if you don't want to bid, you can actually use those workers to use actions on your board to score more points. And that combination of having to decide when is it worth fighting someone for a space, when is it worth just using those workers on my own board, and then in fact you can actually use other players' boards as well, but that's even more expensive and painful to do. Keyflower is as interactive as a Euro game comes. I know there has been some re-implementations of the system, and we tried those this year, Key to the City London, which I did not think improved upon Keyflower for me. Keyflower also has a number of expansions that I want to try, but there is so much in this box. It's a lovely little production, and one that I would absolutely have a hard time ever getting rid of. Love Keyflower.
I want to love Keyflower so much. It's something about the root connections that you're building on your map that just doesn't work for me. I think there is a version of Keyflower that maybe just takes out one or two of the mechanics that I'm not so hot on that would be perfect for me. But yeah, for whatever reason, it didn't ever come together quite as much as I liked it to.
Get good.
My number 25 game has risen 23 spots.
A meteoric rise.
Meteoric Rise. This is also the halfway point of the list, as an aside. Pictomania. This is a frantic, high-stress party game, sort of along the lines of a game we previously spoke about, Anomia. Both those games are, I think, qualify as party games, but are very, very high pressure. I love this game. This is my favorite drawing game.
Second edition.
No, I like first edition, I think, more.
Better?
I think so.
Take a stand, man.
Yeah, I forget what the rules differences are, but I remember reading the rules differences and liking the first edition more.
The main thing is like you can share cards with players in the second edition.
Right.
I don't love that.
Yeah, I like the deduction aspect of it. So yes, this is a game where you are both drawing your clue and guessing other people's clues simultaneously. So if you just imagine that, you know what Pictomania is all about. Absolutely love it. It is my number 25 game of all time.
You know what happens if you rearrange the letters of Pictomania, Mark?
What's that?
You get Anomia picked.
Wait, what?
You do, don't you? Anomia. No,
Anomia's in there.
Anomia. You get Anomia
Picta.
Yeah, exactly. Did you just come up with that? Like,
I just looked at the name.
pretty
Pictomania.
good. Look at this guy.
Well, we did have the mirrored titles. So
Yeah,
that...
this is relevant. Oh wait, did that joke make it? Probably not.
Yeah, I did.
Was it in the
No, I
cut?
think it was in the good cut.
Oh, okay.
The bad cut. We said so many bad things. We started the whole episode over.
We had to shut ourselves down.
My number 25 game is probably, other than Werewords, one of the games that's moved up the most. This is Decrypto. Decrypto is a game that sort of came in onto our list hot last year, and the more I play it, honestly, we talk about how much we like Codenames. There are times I think I might like Decrypto more than Codenames.
Blasphemy.
The only thing that keeps Codenames in its top spot is that Codenames is broadly appealing and accessible by anyone. You can teach it to almost anyone. Decrypto is a much more gamery version of the same game that is honestly a little bit stressful at times, a little bit hard to figure out, but I like that element of like extra thinking you have to do in it. There's also got a boost, I think, in this most recent year with the expansion, the Laserdisc expansion. I think I quite like the little twist it adds to the game. It's not core to the experience. You certainly don't need it, but if you've played Decrypto as much as we have, it gives you another little layer on top of the game that I quite
Have you
like.
played the expansion a lot?
Like 2 or 3 times at Dean's, yeah.
Because I hate the expansion,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
love Decrypto. Like, I actually think the expansion ruins almost everything good about it. Like,
That's interesting. Because
like,
Subtle counterpoint.
what's funny is that we would, in playing base Decrypto, before I even knew about the expansion, play a little game of trying to connect the clues to each other. So this just like gamifies that impulse, which I thought was just which is a fun.
Sorry, small sidebar, and we can get back to the episode. Do you, because how literal you are with the rules does factor into the expansion quite a bit more than normal.
That is very true. And I think that we've gotten that wrong more often than not, I would say, in the way that we interpret what is a valid use of using the categorization part of the expansion. But yeah, it does lead to some more weird edge cases and rules.
And has that happened where someone's going, that's not related to the meaning of the word?
At least once or twice, for sure. Yeah. Not all the time, but
because the expansion basically pushes you into that area
exactly.
and says all of your clues should be this close to not being allowed.
Yeah. It is interesting because, exactly.
I don't know. Anyway, that's irrelevant.
But yeah, regardless, the expansion is sort of just one touchstone in why I think Decrypto has risen up my list this year. It's still a fantastic game that has gotten better the more I play it. That is Decrypto at number 25.
The 24th best board game of all time is A Study in Emerald. Let me finish. Second edition.
I thought you were going to say third edition.
Yeah, I'm coming up with it as we speak. No, I don't need Martin Wallace to help us.
Pokemon themed.
A Study in Emerald, second edition, is a game starring Mr. Cthulhu and his band of friends as you try to stop him from taking over the world. But what makes it interesting is that it is a hidden team game. So you're on a team with other players, but you're not really sure who's on what team. And as you score points, you actually score points as if you were on both teams. And then at the end of the game, when you reveal which team you're on, you lose points for all the points that you earned that would have been helpful for the other team. So there's this bluffing element. The game could be 2 players versus 3 players. You just don't know. And what you're doing is visiting locations, doing a very mild version of deck building as you acquire characters and people to help you either fight or help Mr. Cthulhu in his reign on Earth. I have no love of the Lovecraftian theme at all, which we've alluded to, but something about this just feels unlike any other game that I have played, and it plays in a reasonable length of time. There are many proponents of A Study in Emerald First Edition, which is an even longer, crazier, weirder version of A Study in Emerald Second Edition. I'd love to try it someday, but I'm more than happy with the level of weirdness that's in A Study in Emerald Second Edition. There is another very cool rule, which is that if you are on the team with the player who scores the least amount of points, you lose a certain number of points. So you're trying to help your team. And in the first edition, if you were on the team with the player who had the lowest amount of points, you just lost. Like, you couldn't win. So there's this like interesting element to who you're helping and why you're doing the things that you're doing that makes A Study in Emerald Second Edition quite good. You've played it, Neilan?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot.
But it's weird.
It is weird. It's extremely weird.
Was this ever re-implemented with a different theme, or were they talking about it?
Maybe. Not to my knowledge.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'm just
my knowledge is actually probably more limited on this than many of my other favorite games.
This is one that I've wanted to play for a while. Seems interesting. My number 24 game has dropped 13 spots, so meteoric drop, I guess. This is Rising Sun. Rising Sun is a dudes on the map game, which was supposed to be a successor in some ways to Diplomacy, which isn't, but it still has enough interesting aspects to it that I really enjoy playing it. I guess one of the biggest noteworthy aspects of the game is the asymmetric factions. Each faction has a quite game-breaking power, and that sort of dictates the way you play the game, which is also a drawback. It sort of puts you down a lane. But I do like the way that combat is done. I know it's a divisive aspect of the game, but combat is done with a sort of blind bidding mechanism that I think is sort of interesting and also very stressful. A very stressful blind bidding aspect that I like. This has led to some of our most contentious games. I think episode 5, we recap a memorable ending we had to Rising Sun. It's just one that I enjoy. I think the negotiating aspect, it was oversold, but there's still enough of it that I sort of like it, and the fact that you can make alliances. I think there's just enough interesting aspects to that, or parts of that, to carry it. So my number 24 game is Rising Sun.
Rising Sun, for me, the member that probably doesn't have this on his top 50 at all, I feel like the asymmetric factions do too much to push you towards a specific type of strategy. And the game is so Euro-minded that by not utilizing that strategy, you won't win the game. And then the way that the mandate system works feels very like limited in the potential actions that you have available to you are just very specific and focused, and to my mind not as interesting as other dudes on a map games. This is another example of a game that I really, really like, and in the absence of, in my opinion, superior games like Blood Rage, I would probably have somewhere at the bottom of my list. Sure. It also doesn't help with the whole diplomacy thing, which it's nothing like diplomacy, right, even though it's supposed to be evoking some of that flavor.
Okay, my number 24 game is Spirit Island. This is a game that around about this time last year, I was actually maybe wavering on my love for Spirit Island a little bit because it was falling into a trap of delivering a similar experience every time. But the one thing I did to inject new life into this game is finally play on the higher difficulties, add some of the more interesting adversaries and the things that mix up the middle of the game. And that really changes the game quite fundamentally. It went back to being a game that I thought was quite challenging, which quite frankly it hadn't been since I started playing Spirit Island. Once you figure out its systems, it can be, while it always seems overwhelming, you realize, okay, you're always able to get on top of them. But once you start ramping up the difficulty, it brings back the challenge and the thing that really excited me about Spirit Island when I first got it. So I would recommend getting into the more interesting adversaries and the more interesting difficulties and some of the more complicated spirits sooner rather than later. Spirit Island is a game that continues to surprise me with the way that each spirit's vast asymmetry connects. So every game is going to be different depending on the combination of spirits you have at the table. It is a game that I'm finding I prefer at 2 more than 3 or 4 even, just because it condenses it down to a shorter experience. But I would still happily play this at 3 or 4 players, even if it does run long at those player counts. That is Spirit Island.
I enjoyed checking out Spirit Island, and as someone who doesn't like co-ops, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. Would you say that the interesting thing in Spirit Island is exploring the characters more than what's going on the board?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like playing a new character each time is good, but also it's the combination of characters at the table. So even if you're playing the same spirit, but your friends are playing different ones, they connect with each other. They combine their strengths in interesting ways.
Yeah, for some reason, the characters and the cards feel more interesting than what you actually end up doing with them on the board. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
I think I get what you're saying, yeah.
Cool. My number 23 favorite game of all time is new to the list for this year, though the game itself is not new at all. This is a mean old Euro game, Hansa Teutonica. Hansa Teutonica is a route building game where you are also trying to upgrade your capabilities to do different things on the board. So you have a player board that allows you to do certain actions, and everything that you do is a trade-off on unlocking your ability to take more actions versus unlocking your ability to get into better and better building locations. And as you play pieces on the board, you're bumping other pieces off. And when you bump someone is important, because when you bump them, they actually get to relocate, and that may be what they wanted you to do. So a good strategy is to go to a very important location early in the hopes of being bumped by other players. Hansa Teutonica is one game that I felt like I knew I would like, and when we played it, it was even better than I expected it to be. I know there are various re-implementations and versions of this game coming soon. Big Box, I think, is on the horizon.
Yeah.
I don't know what's in there. I will absolutely be interested in checking it out. My experience with Hansa Teutonica is limited, but honestly, it just made such an impression for the length of play versus the decision space versus how cutthroat it really was.
Yeah, I totally agree. I absolutely love this game.
I have to play it. Both of you were raving about your game of it.
So good. This is so good.
Yeah, the So Very Wrong About Games crew love this a lot too. I regret I didn't get to try with them at Chuck's, but yeah, that sounds amazing. I want to play it.
My number 23 game moved up 12 slots. This is my favorite of the Knizia auction games. It's Modern Art.
There's been like 3 times where I've wanted to shout Medici because I think that's what what you're saying, and that it's never Medici.
Right.
So,
is Medici your favorite Knizia?
I've never played it,
okay.
But I just feel like you might like it.
Gotcha. I do like Medici, but it's not my favorite. My favorite is Modern Art, as I've said. I now own a number of copies of this, and it's actually, if you're going to own a lot of different copies of a game, Modern Art would be one of the best ones to do, because I have like the Oink version, and I've got this Korean version, I've got the new Simon version, which is also beautiful. Modern Art is a pure auction game. In the game, what you're doing is you're trying to auction off pieces of art, and the auctions take place in one of 5 ways. There is a once-around auction. There is an open auction where you can just bid at whatever you want. There is a closed fist auction. So basically, it distills the different types of auctions and puts them all in this game. So you're auctioning off these pieces, and the twist is, the thing that sets it apart is that every round, whatever artist has sold the most pieces, their art will be worth the most points, and those values will carry over. So, for example, if artist A in the first round sold the most pieces, his art is worth, say, I forget what the most is, but it's like 100,000 per piece sold. The thing is, though, if in the second round that artist is not in the top 3, his art is worth nothing. So it sort of mirrors the idea of the art world where you can be hot one day and be worthless the next. But then in the following round, if he makes a comeback and if his art sells again, if he finishes in one of the top 3 spots, his art is worth whatever value he got in that round plus all previous rounds. So it's this interesting thing of like, maybe he's been fallen out of favor for a while. Maybe this artist has fallen out of favor for the last couple of rounds, but he has this pedigree, and if I can just rally him for this last round, I'll make all that money that he's been worth in his history. I just like it for the purity of it. I like it for your ability at the table to sort of bully the game. I like games that allow you to like throw your weight around or make cunning moves in the auction to get ahead. And I like the social commentary. It always just feels funny towards the end of the game when you're hyping up an artist saying he can do it again. He's done it before. He can come back and strike it rich. So it's my favorite pure auction game. It's got all you want.
You know, your description of it has never sold me on it, but the Orchid Tank, Paula Deming's love of modern art made me want to play it immediately.
Did you ever play it?
No.
Okay,
No,
so how
have we not
effective
played
is she?
this?
How effective is she then?
I really, really want to try this.
Yeah, this is great.
And I think we would enjoy it.
I think
a great
for sure.
deal.
For sure, yeah. 23, modern art, up 12 spots.
My number 23 game is Patchwork. This is my favorite light 2-player game. It's a game that I've had success playing with my mum. She loves it, so it's one I will be taking home. It's a simple game to teach. It is satisfying Palomino tile laying with a very interesting economy of time and buttons. So it's almost got like an engine building component where as you're placing tiles, they generate buttons, and every time you pass certain points in the time track, you get buttons back. So do you place a big piece on your board in order to fill space, or do you place a piece with a lot of buttons? The costs are going to vary. And every piece also has a certain amount of time associated with it, which is going to determine how close you are to ending your game. So there's just a very fun balance of 3 different things: filling space, getting buttons, not spending too much time. And you have to balance all 3 of them to do well at Patchwork, which is my number 23 best game of all time.
My 22nd favorite board game of all time is the third of 4 Oink games on my list, this being Insider. Insider is very, very similar to Werewords, as Neilan spoke about earlier, but in Insider, you're playing a small game of 20 questions, except one player knows the word that you are trying to get to. And the Insider loses if you don't get there, but they also lose if everyone can figure out who already knew the word after you do, in fact, get to the word. So it's this harshness of trying to subtly steer the group towards a word without being too revealing. It's such a brilliant conceit. I think that everyone has played 20 questions. So when you say, well, it's 20 questions, except someone already knows it, but they can't be too obvious about the fact that they already know it, it immediately clicks. It makes sense. It plays quick and clean. I really, really like Insider. I do agree that it's almost more of an activity. And if you want to play the gamery game version, you should get Werewords. But I almost think the word gamery is a pejorative these days. Neilan?
Like I said, I flatly disagree. I think Werewords is a strictly better version of this that you could reduce to Insider if you so felt like it. Werewords just gives you more options to vary up the game in ways that I find adds to it.
But I think you could use Insider and then add 3 pieces of paper and then play Werewords.
Yeah, no, that's fair too.
So it's like
I think there's no losing with either game.
No, absolutely.
Absolutely true.
I have umbrage with, we could take the City of the Big Shoulders components, and play Splendor with them. Anyway, I think it's a great game. You would be remiss to not try Insider and Werewords. They're so good.
My number 22 game is probably the game on the list that I've played most recently. I played it with these guys.
Silver and Gold?
Silver and Gold.
Down,
By
Mark.
Phil Walker Harding.
No.
I was just waiting for us to play it. We took a break to play it, and then I was like, I got to move everything over, and I'm going to put it right here. No, this is Glory 2, Rome. Chudy X Glory to Rome. Down 1 spot from last year for me. So this is after playing it with them. I decided to dock it in spot. No. It's a fantastic game.
Suck.
That's right. Fantastic game. Among the best. Probably the best. Multi-use card game around. Gives you tactics plus strategy. Gives you the wild swings of innovation, but allows you to play strategically as well. Just a really great game. We talked about it just a couple episodes ago. Absolutely great.
Without you.
Yeah, we
Oh, that's
talked
right.
about it a couple
Oh, yeah.
times.
I was actually
I'm not sure
gonna.
if you did.
I was gonna ask you if during the editing you're like, "Oh, I really just wanted to say this one thing
No, I
about
just
Glory
ta-
to Rome," because you had played it with us,
Right.
but then didn't record it.
As I was editing, I was just talking like if I was there.
Yeah,
I was like, good point, Kellen. I'd like to add that.
Were you laughing at these jokes?
I was laughing at his jokes. I made up for Paxton's dropping the ball in that respect.
thank you.
Yeah, I sort of alluded to this fact on that episode that I think there's a universe where if I play Glory to Rome more, I might like it more than an innovation, and I think that might be true. Like, I would definitely want to play it more in 2020 if we can, and see if that does actually pan out.
Yep. My number 22 is Glory to Rome. Down 1 spot.
My 22nd best game of all time is Archipelago. This was the semi-co-op game that I alluded to a couple of episodes back that is higher up on my list. I think this is the best interpretation of the idea of semi-co-op games that I've yet played. It is a medium heavyweight Euro game that is married with this idea that one player at the table might be the traitor. While you're playing the game, you're sort of solving these economic crises. You're creating little plantations and things around these islands, the archipelago, in order to get resources which you use to resolve these crises. A traitor might be amongst you trying to sort of tank the crises and sort of bring the game down. Meanwhile, everyone else is also working towards their own unique victory condition. So there's a lot of sort of double think about why people are doing what they're doing. Are they sort of working against us? Are they just working in their own interest? What is Kellen trying to do with all those pineapples? That is Archipelago. And I think it works really well. It's super satisfying. It is a game that's perhaps a little bit clunky in some of the rules of it, in the way that activations work, but I cannot recommend Archipelago enough if you've tried a semi-co-op game but haven't quite found one that really works.
You have this sense because each player knows one of the scoring conditions. You only know 1 out of 5 things, let's say, that's going to score. So it's a lot of looking around the table, similar to Curse Court, a really light game that I like, and figuring out like what's going on. I had a recent play of this where one player built a church on a complete lark, like for no reason apparently, and then everyone else at the table became obsessed with churches, and we all built one, and then another player built 2, and then it was revealed at the end of the game that they had done nothing, and like we all thought it was a victory condition. And so just that rush for those resources, that ruins the market for those resources because people start paying extra for them. It's just something is so silly and clever and fun about just something like that.
That is my number 22 game, Archipelago.
My number 21, my favorite game of all time, is a double crossover. Well, this might be a triple crossover.
Triple?
No.
The
Well,
double?
you just said Decrypto.
Yeah.
I did not say Decrypto. If you've been paying attention.
Well, no, I have. I mean, it's a long day. It's a long very
day.
long.
Long day. We just started recording this one.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Half an hour.
You got to keep the illusion
So my number 21 best board game of all time is a double crossover with Mr. Neilan. It's noticed there's more crossover with you guys thus far than with me,
true.
but now we're having a double
crossover moment.
Decrypto. Neilan gave the general idea of Decrypto. What I love about it is just this sense of trying to be duplicitous, which is to both communicate something to your teammate while also trying to throw off the trail of another team. So, they know about fire and flame, and then you use the word burning, but it actually is referring to another clue, and that's how you throw off the dog trail. I kind of think about you're running away from them, and you have to escape and double back, and as long as you can trip them up once per round, you continue to survive in Decrypto. It is a little overwrought for being just like a straight party game, so I think it's just a smidgen more complicated than that. I don't refuse to teach this game. I refuse to let people ask questions while I teach Decrypto, which is not me being hard to deal with at all. My number 21 game, Decrypto. Such a good game.
Very, very good.
My number 21 game is new to the list. That leaves 2 more new games to be called on, but the last one for this list. Shout out to Woggers on our Discord. I know this is his favorite game of all time. So this is Lancaster, a game like other games that we've spoken about on the list previously. This is an old game. Doesn't look very appealing, doesn't look very exciting. Looks like the standard old Euro, but this is a very rough, very mean worker placement game where you can place your piece down, but you can always be bumped, which is sort of the core conceit of Lancaster and one that I love. So if you place your worker on a spot, all it takes is somebody else's worker plus 1 squire, which is basically an additional worker to bump you off. And then that piece is now occupied by a worker and a squire. So if you want to knock that piece off again, it'll take you at least a worker and 2 squire. But if you really, really want the spot and you don't want anybody else to threaten you may place a worker and say 4 or 5 squire just to lock it down. Because anytime you get bumped off, you always get your piece back, so you'll always be able to replace it. But any squires you had, any of these additional units that strengthen your ability to take over a spot are lost whenever you get bumped. So it's like you try to figure out, can I limp in with just 1 extra guy, or do I need to really put a bunch down and lock a space down? There's also an interesting aspect which is known as the laws phase that happens round to round, where the inter-round scoring is determined by laws that are voted on by the players at the end of every round. So you can see what potential scorings are going to be at the end of the round, and you can decide if you are going to try to go for one of these upcoming scorings, or if you don't want to, if you're worried about somebody else's ability to really capitalize, you can do your best to garner as many votes to vote that potential scoring out. So, Neilan may be banking on scoring for having a large presence on the board, but if you, and preferably if you and another player conspire to add your votes together, or if you can do it yourself, you can vote that scoring method down and therefore restrict your opponent from having the ability to score that way. It's just, again, really well designed. Everything goes really smoothly. After a round of playing it, you know exactly how the flow goes, and I just love it. It's just very smooth. Huge fan of my 21st game of all time, Lancaster.
The law voting system is one of those things where when I played Lancaster, I asked myself why more games didn't use it. It's such a smart system for handling Eurogame scoring.
Yes. Yeah.
I wish more games did it.
Lancaster is hovering somewhere in my 50s, and wish I had played it a few more times because I do think it could have made it into my top 50 as well. What a well-done, simple game that has more going on underneath than you have to deal with on the surface.
My number 21 game is Aeon's End. Last year, I sort of would have recommended Aeon's End War Eternal specifically, but I'm sort of expanding this to a more blanket term because there are a bunch of different versions of Aeon's End right now. I believe there are 3 standard editions that are just standalone boxes, and there's Aeon's End Legacy. Aeon's End Legacy might be the one I would recommend if you want to dive into Aeon's End, because I found that I'm not completed my campaign of it, but it sort of peels back some of the rules at the start of the game, which might be a weird thing to go to. Well, I found it weird to go to after being quite familiar with Aeon's End War Eternal, but it does a good job of ramping you into the rule set for it while telling a story and a campaign structure. I can't speak to the length of the campaign or like how that plays out for the rest of it because I've already sort of started playing it, but it still seems to deliver what I love about Aeon's End, which is a game that is trying to emulate video game boss battles. It's a cooperative deck builder where you're acquiring spells that you then sort of charge up. You use to attack the boss, to attack its minions while they're doing attacks against you and the town. And when the town takes enough damage, you lose. When the boss takes enough damage, you win. What is unique about it is that every box of Aeon's End includes a bunch of unique bosses, and like learning that the way they intersect with the rules in different ways is the game. Like trying to figure out how to overcome it is something that might take a couple of games against the same boss. But once you sort of hone your strategy against it, you get very effective at doing that. And it does feel like that sort of curve of overcoming and getting better at defeating video game bosses. That is Aeon's End, my number 21 best game of all time.
That is going to do it for this episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us throughout 2019. We look forward to exciting things in the year 2020. You can find us on BoardGameBarrage.com. You can find us on Discord at BoardGameBarrage.com/Discord or in our guild at BoardGameBarrage.com/guild. We do try to read everything that you send us, so please don't hesitate to interact. Or email us at BoardGameBarrage@gmail.com if you have a suggestion or thing you want to talk about with us, the tanks of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Thanks again to Heart Society for letting us use the song What's on Your Mind, Kid from their album Wake the Queens. Thanks so much, and see you next week.
Bye-bye.
I'm a professional. There was a joke I did in the last episode where I just said the same thing 3 times and then just kept going, and then none of you... I said the same word. I can't remember.
Man? Wait, is that what...
Oh, no, maybe I did that and this.
Oh, last episode?
Yeah, there was one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The thing is, I got no sleep this week. None. So this is going to get worse.
That's great. That's what we want.
I barely slept at all last night as well for some reason.
I actually didn't sleep very much last night.
Which is hilarious. I don't ever have trouble sleeping, but I was like up until like 3 a.m, unable to get to sleep.
Neilan, go to bed.
No, but I was in
Neilan's
bed.
mom.
I just couldn't sleep.
Move the inserts out of the bed. One body pillow worth of inserts.
But yeah, I get what you're saying. It's like every game. I think one of the biggest.
Why does it, you like laughed at something like off audio, so no one's gonna know why we're laughing now? I don't know. Anyway, good job.
What did I do?
Well,
I didn't do anything. You guys were laughing off audio. Okay, that is Quest for El Dorado. My
Cockroach Poker is fantastic.
Do we want to wait for that?
What is that?
I don't know.
Chris,
I did something.
Do you know what's happening?
No, is that coming from in here?
Yeah, I think so. It's in the kitchen.
oh, this is gold. Keep it going. There is a timer going off in the apartment. Christina?
Hello, and welcome to episode number 100.
Say something we can use. What are you, episode 100?
I don't know what episode.
We're talking about Cockroach Poker.
Oh, Cockroach Poker, my favorite cockroach game.
Say Kakerlaken.
Kakerlaken.
You like Cockroach Poker?
Yeah, I do. Wait, that's not Cheating Moth. I always get Cheating Moth and Cockroach Poker.
This is the one where you say, this is a spider, and you have to...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, this is fun. I always get got on this one because I'm bad at lying and people can always tell. But it's really fun. I like it a lot. But it's not as good as Cheating Moth. So if Cheating Moth is not on your top 50, but Kakerlaken is.
He said that was his best. That was the best bug game ever
I
made.
did already introduce this
What?
best bug game.
No.
I mean, Cheating Moth is
Cheating Moth
good.
is better. I'm also really good at Cheating Moth. So that helps.
Wait, you're not good at lying, but you are good at cheating?
Yeah, exactly. It's really weird talking into Neilan's microphone.
Neilan, do you need help? Like this beeping's just continuing, and we're like, oh well, we can keep it going. You've got his list. Like,
that's true.
Tell us what he thinks. Tell us what he thinks
number are
about
we on?
Zulkin. 20.
Wow, I have a lot of spoilers here. I have his whole list.
Yeah, don't spoil it for yourself. Are you spoiling it for yourself?
No, I'm going to spoil it for everyone. Neilan's number 10 game of all. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that.
There you go.
Are you okay, Neilan? I love how I keep saying, "Are you okay?" but only into the microphone, not where he can hear.
Neilan, was it my fault?
No, I don't know. The fridge is
That was my fault. I was trying to be quiet. I closed it really quietly, and I guess
you
that
closed
means
it in quotes.
Yeah, I guess that means I didn't close
Wait,
it.
that whole beeping sequence was because your fridge wasn't closed?
But the thing is, I couldn't get it to close properly. Like even opening it and reclosing it wasn't turning off the alarm. It kept saying door alarm, door alarm, door alarm.
Okay, goodbye, everyone. Kakerlaken Christmas.
Well, easy money. Bye. It's like we did a good thing, you know, like as the kids say. Easy money. Bye. Okay, thanks, Christina.
My number 26 favorite game of all time is Android Netrunner. This has fallen a little bit, and I've got to be honest, it is a game that is going to be hard to recommend in 2019 because it is a closed box game. It's a living card game that is done.
Can you say that again, but in the way that I want you to say it?
How do you want me to say it?
Neilan, it's so easy. Mark?
No idea.
Okay.
I don't have a clue what you're talking
Okay,
about.
the sentence he said was, it's a living
Okay,
card
got
game
it.
that's done.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. God, I hope we're thinking the same thing. Anyway, it's a game that's going to be hard to recommend in 2019 because it is a dead card game.
No, what do you do?
What?
Like, well,
It's
say
a
it.
living card game that's dead.
Come on, Neilan. What do you gotta stick the landing. It's
Oh my
it's Android
God.
Netrunner. It's a living card game that's dead.
Okay. Okay.
Well, we don't need to like write your script. I just,
No, I
when
like,
you said that is done, I was just like, oh,
Okay.
I was so excited
Well, I
for
kind
you.
of like butchered the whole thing in
Oh,
the
I
first
know,
go in
yeah,
every
yeah.
way and
No,
kind
I'm
of
just
muddled
kidding.
the order.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll say it because it's funny. I will take that line. Okay.